Good evening, everyone. I'm Storm Team 8 Chief Meteorologist Steve Jerve alongside Julie Phillips, and we're here to give you an update on Hurricane Irma. Very serious because the track has shifted back to the west. And for those that have not been through a hurricane before, when we say very serious, we're talking about high winds especially, and that's going to be going on especially on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Sunday night into Monday morning. Thankfully, the storms can move through quickly, but at least there's going to be a good chunk of 12 hours where we'll be seeing some very rough conditions.
Right, and that would start, say, Sunday morning throughout the day on Sunday, and then later into Monday. And even Monday morning, we'll probably see some stuff as the storm moves to the north and the winds come strong around the backside of it. So let's get right to it and talk about, first of all, a little hurricane comparison back in '92. This wind field was 180 miles. It was a very tight, compact storm and did a lot of damage in South Florida, south of Miami. You live there, and I was down in there, and the storm itself. So it was a very intense system, and it was just usually when storms are smaller and compact, they're just more intense. This one's a little larger, although it's been a Category 5 storm. It's a strong Category 4 now. That wind field is 370 miles. I mean, if you take a look at the way it is on satellite, it basically will cover the entire state of Florida.
Right. It's going to impact a lot of people. So it's not just us here in the Tampa Bay area. Pretty much most of the state is going to feel some significant impacts.
Exactly right. Should dial up your phone there and see if we can get some comments going here. The advisories in place are a hurricane warning. That essentially means within 36 hours you're going to see the potential of seeing some wind gusts up to 74 miles per hour. So, or 74 miles per hour and beyond. The hurricane watch means 48 hours. Basically, it means the storm's headed our way, and to prepare for high winds especially, and other hazards as well, especially as what we'll talk about, some of the coastal issues. When the storm has shifted to the west a little bit, as you're probably well aware of by now, that just tends to change the effects a little bit on different parts of the state. So that's what we'll talk about here shortly. There's a look at the satellite image, very close to the eye, the coastal areas of Cuba, and really a lot of it is interacting with land at this point. And according to the National Hurricane Center, it's still holding on to that Category 4 strength, which is remarkable because typically land areas, especially when the center of the eye of the hurricane moves over there, you'll see some weakening take place. But they don't forecast a lot of that with this storm.
No, which is interesting. And you can see now it's still pretty much going due west. So you could actually see that eye interact some with Cuba on that westward path, but max wind still at 155 miles per hour. So it's maintained a strong Category 4 or 5 strength for many days now.
That's what's been so remarkable about the storm itself. It's just been so strong for such a long period of time, and it'd be historical in that regard. But when to get this thing out of here, we have to, unfortunately, looks like move through the state of Florida first. So hurricane warnings all over the place. Went through the Turks and Caicos last night, and of course hurricane warnings on the northern Cuban coast. Saturday, both in the morning and then throughout the day and the afternoon, moving right near coastal areas. My hope is that with some interaction, we'll see a little bit of weakening with the system itself. It'll be very interesting to see. Now, the Hurricane Center feels that's not going to happen on Saturday. They feel like it's going to stay fairly strong, but if it's going to be interacting with land over the next day or so, hopefully, potentially, we could see a small bit of weakening here.
Yeah, we'll see. And Saturday will be a very important day because that's the day we've been waiting for this storm to kind of change direction and make that move to the north. And once that does happen, then our forecast will even become even more accurate of exactly the track. But our models, are coming into consensus slowly, although the track will continue to shift, which is why we still have the cone there.
Well, the closer you get to landfall, the more accurate the forecast is going to be. And that shift over the last 48 hours is important, and that's why the track is shifted as well.
And most of the comments we're getting in are people, letting us know where they're at and where they're coming from and their experiences with hurricanes so far.
Right. So let's just go ahead and zoom in. Since we're not on TV, we can. Oh, we are kind of on TV. So that's Sunday at 2 a.m. with 160 mile per hour winds. You can see that's in the center portion of the Keys. And this is just a forecast track. Notice the cone. Notice the cone. Notice the cone. If you've been listening at the beginning of the week, you would know that it can move within that cone. That's Sunday at 2 p.m. And you can see Naples right there. Fort Myers just to the north of that. So you have to remember, too, it's on the eastern side of that or to the right of that spinning icon. That's where the stronger winds are. That's where the storm's advancing with that counterclockwise circulation.
And then we continue that trek north as we head through the day on Sunday, and you can see now.
That's not accurate, though, is it, Julie?
No, you just can, when you click forward and move ahead, that's our graphic trying to catch up to where you see on Monday it's a tropical storm. So it will weaken basically from a Category 4 to a tropical storm by the time it exits Florida and moves into Georgia. So probably by the time it gets into the Tampa Bay area, depending on whereabouts you are, we're talking about a Category 2 or 3 storm on this current track.
You can see our 11 county viewing area in there highlighted. And so we're talking, just kind of eyeballing it, you can see moving just east of Fort Myers, across DeSoto, across Hardy County, across the western part of Polk County, and then eventually across the eastern part of Hernando County and Pasco County, very close to over Zephyr Hills and Dade City on the current track. And then as you slide to the north, you can kind of see where it ends up eventually. So that's just kind of drawing a straight line there to get an idea where that will pass. Again, the stronger winds would be on the eastern side, so folks in central and eastern Polk and Highlands County in particular. Central and eastern Polk and Highlands County in particular, you can see the strongest winds because that's the advancing part of the side with the storm with the counterclockwise winds.
And we're talking probably winds potentially gusts over 100 miles per hour if you are on the eastern side of that, as the storm will still be quite strong when it's in that area. So these are, you know, very significant wind gusts we have the potential to see.
Right, and then just very quickly you can see where the storm is forecast to be long-term, moving to the north. But clearly that's what we're focused on, and I want to, point out the seriousness. Those who have been through Charlie and Francis and Jean in 2004 know what a strong wind gust feels like. I had them at my home. I had strong tropical storm force, probably 70-mile-per-hour gusts, knocked out power at my home for about 3 days with Francis, and knocked down some plants, etc. It's quite scary. So the stronger it gets, the more powerful. Yeah, we're on air right now, so just you can change those out. We have how you doing?
Hello.
The cleaning person in here helping us out here. All right, so there we go. We are looking at Key West Doppler radar. And the center of the storm is clearly there on the satellite, infrared satellite, and we're already seeing the outer bands.
We are. In Key West radar already picking those up, still a good ways away, and this is just, kind of just shows you the magnitude and the size of the storm that we're already able to pick up on those outer bands at this point already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can always see how the flow is controlled. This is probably, about 300 miles roughly from Miami, the southeast. But isn't it amazing how quickly a storm takes over control of the atmosphere and controls the flow even over the state today? It's that influential on the atmosphere. And you see the center of the eye right there. The visible imagery out of the GOES 16 was stunning, as we've been seeing, and the detail of that,
yes.
The frequent updates are fantastic. We've got some time yet. Julie's got an 8 o'clock show coming up too on
Grade 38 WTTA. And here's the spaghetti models. We've been looking at these for days now. You guys have been seeing these, and you notice there is a cluster of these moving through the same path. So at this time, we think this is the current track. But you have seen these shift over the past couple of days, so they can still shift some over the next day or two before this moves up, makes landfall. But at this point, it looks more like a Naples track, and then moving up, the probably west central portions of the state, our inland areas, basically.
Right, which is why we've seen the Hurricane Center shift its path. This is interesting to look at, and it's just a computer model. It's a rough guide, but maybe it gives you the idea of both wind direction and possible wind gusts that you could experience through this area. This is Saturday at 9:30. You see the timestamp there, and that goes throughout the early part of Sunday. You can see the winds will start to increase, especially the early part of Sunday. These are wind gusts, not sustained, but certainly we can see some very strong wind gusts. That's Sunday afternoon, and assuming the center of low pressure is still to our south, we're seeing a strong east and northeasterly component. Then as we get throughout the day, and as that center of the storm moves to the north, later Sunday, early Monday morning, that's when we'll see some strong wind gusts.
Yeah, and that's probably going, if you're wondering when the heart of the storm is really going to be hitting us, it's going to be Sunday night into Monday morning. You can see this is, the timestamp shows you Monday, 2:30 a.m., and we're seeing pretty much area-wide tropical storm force wind gusts at this time, with, wind gusts even higher in our inland spots. So especially eastern Polk, Highlands County, you could be seeing gusts even higher than this at times within that storm as it passes easily.
Yeah, and also interesting to point out, notice as the storm moves to the north, as we get into Monday, how those winds shift. They're onshore, and that's why we're concerned about perhaps some coastal flooding, as well as very high tides, because those winds will come northwest and then west. That's the saltwater influence I was talking about. And of course, the winds will lessen as they move from south to north. But that's where we really have to watch those tides. We have a storm surge watch and a warning in place.
We do. For Sarasota County, again, this is probably going to be the county closest to where that storm does make landfall, as it looks like right now. And storm surge warning in effect. Watch is in effect for parts of Manatee, Pinellas, and Hillsborough County as we fine-tune the track.
Right. And this is a look at that storm surge potential. This is a product out of our weather computer company that kind of gives you a rough guide as to what you can expect up in these. Even you can see the water goes up into the southern part of DeSoto County. A lot of people west of 17. A lot of people don't know that, but we're talking 3 to 6 feet for this area, 3 to 6. So if you're in that area, no, that's the kind of, if you want to call it a surge in that area, there's a storm surge warning there. Also, you can see up into Hillsborough Bay as well, depending on the timing of this. And this is throughout the whole event. So this can mean that when we get those strong westerly winds, it just doesn't let the high tide out. That's why the high tide times are so important. Farther north, total surge 3 to 8 feet, Sunday afternoon to Monday morning as that wind comes more west and northwest.
And the National Weather Service actually highlighting, parts of Citrus County, the coastal areas there as a potential spot to maybe see a little bit of a higher surge in that particular location. Something to keep in mind if you are in Citrus County.
Right. Okay. So this is important, the high tides. I know it's kind of a lot of numbers to look at, but if you're living in these areas or if you're watching here on Facebook Live, just look at the area that you're interested in and note the high tides for Sunday and also for Monday. Monday morning, especially there at 3:30 a.m. in Sarasota Bay and 3:30 a.m. as well for Venice. And note the Sunday high tide times as well. Those are very important if you live on coastal areas because I tell you what, it doesn't take a whole lot to change that wind direction. I've seen before where hurricanes and tropical storms have passed us off in the Gulf and changed that wind direction and almost immediately. You've got some kind of coastal flooding. And then even some strong wind gusts too off of the Gulf. There's nothing to really get in the way of those wind gusts, so they can be really, even on the backside, surprisingly strong. So just remember that too.
And you can see here's high tide, Anna Maria Island, 4:30 p.m., 2:39 a.m., Bradenton, 4:08 a.m., 5:59 p.m. Of course, if you live in other areas, you can look up the tides online as well if you're looking at a very specific spot. But we're kind of highlighting a few different areas you may be interested to see. Clearwater, 3:11 a.m., 4:34 p.m., Madeira Beach, 3:52 a.m. on Monday, 5:43 p.m. on Monday. And then Hillsborough Bay, 5:39 a.m. on Monday and 7:30 p.m. on Monday. Some people have been referencing Bayshore Boulevard. So those are some key times to keep in mind, especially if you live off those areas near Bayshore Boulevard where we could see some flooding.
Right. Yep.
And Monday with the, the back end of the system.
Just when you think the storm is gone, it's not. But we have to get through the heart of the storm, and especially the wind gusts in particular, which are going to be pretty rough. Crystal River, Hernando Beach, and Newport Richey to complete our little tour up the coast here. 5:18 a.m. for Crystal River, 5 o'clock in the morning, Hernando Beach, and 4:23 a.m. on Monday morning, and then 5:38 in the afternoon. But you'll have that northwest and westerly component, and that'll be pretty tough to follow along there. Also, the wave heights kind of drag this along to sort of focus on the west coast, and you can see there's some strong ones on the east coast as well, but depends on where it ends up in terms of the flow. But you can see we're talking some pretty high seas, especially offshore, 20, 25 feet.
Right, very significant and a big change. I mean, that's a big change from this same map just 2 days ago with the different track that we're seeing.
Trying to find the center of the system itself. Okay, and there we go. As we get into Tuesday, things definitely start to improve throughout that period and then kind of return to normal for Wednesday. So our rainfall potential, this is the European computer model, which we have to give credit to, was the first to kind of shift back to the west. So we have a lot of respect for that here in the short term. So there you see the amount of rain. You could see 8+ inches of rain, which causes local flooding problems, obviously.
And we hope it won't last for too long as the storm is moving in and moving out pretty quickly. But in that, short period of time, especially as the rain starts to pile up on Monday, that'll definitely be the day where, you're not going anywhere much on Monday.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't think a lot of people will be expecting it to show up at work on Monday. All right. Also, the two other storms. Jose is a substantial hurricane, 150-mile-per-hour winds. It's pushing Hurricane 5 status. But the good news is, for us, is it'll stay offshore. The bad news is for places like Barbuda and Antigua, that's very close to that area, and they just got pummeled by Irma. So we're thinking about those folks down there. We also have one other storm, Katia.
Yep, Katia, thankfully, is just moving right into land. It strengthened very rapidly, already a category, it's supposed to be a category 2 as we head into tomorrow morning when it makes landfall. So, this is a very active time, but September 10th is peak hurricane season, so it's not totally a surprise that we're dealing with so much at this time. Irma could potentially, it looks like it will make landfall on the, exact peak of hurricane season.
Right. I kind of cycled through some maps, but this just want to wrap it up with Julie will be on Grade 38 coming up at 8 o'clock. And of course, we'll have an update at 11 p.m. on the forecast track. And I want to urge you to take those preparations at your home right now. The best advice is to run from the water, hide from the wind. If you don't have to evacuate, you're not in a water evacuation zone. Of course, it's completely your choice, whatever you'd like to do. But in terms of preparing your home, keep the wind out. I'll say it again, keep the wind out. Protect the windows, the garage door, the front door. Just keep the wind out. Don't crack your windows, anything like that. It's been proven time and again, that's the way that your house can get through it the best, is to keep the wind out of your home, and then have your supplies inside and plan on the power going out. If it does, don't be afraid. We'll actually be broadcasting, not only you can find us on Facebook or other WFLA.com, but also you can find us on radio at Spirit FM 90.5. We'll be broadcasting on there.
Which is a great partnership to have.
Right. And also News Radio 970 WFLA. So we'll be somewhere that you can hear us, and we'll be there with you through this storm, before, during, and after.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Stay tuned.